Okay, the other topic for this week is reproductive health and reproductive rights for women. And your textbook does a pretty good job of covering a lot of these subjects, but I'm going to just touch on a few more of these in detail here because one of them is also part of your activity for this week. So continuing with this life stream concept that I introduced in the last lecture, the reproductive life stream is what we're really considering. And in the case of birth control and abortion, these are things that are involved in a woman's ability to manage her fertility, and that can take several different forms. Contraception, abortion, and infanticide are known universal methods associated with these management strategies. The first written accounts in human history mention methods of birth control. A sort of desire for controlling the life stream is universal across cultures and across time. Very basic birth control methods include include modifying or avoiding vaginal intercourse, using certain different techniques or the timing of it, taking something by the mouth, or using other means of blocking the cervix itself. Historically, and also in other non-Western methods, are known that help to prevent pregnancy itself. Coitus interruptus, which is just a fancy way of saying the pull-out method, as well as other postpartum sex taboos, have a very deep history. Avoiding simultaneous orgasms or jumping and shaking around the body after sex are some of these historical examples we have. There are also ancient recipes that use oily, astringent, acidic, gummy, or other fibrous substances to either evacuate the pregnancy itself or to help block the sperm from entering the cervix and causing a pregnancy. Tannic acid from tree bark and nuts is actually a very effective spermicide. We have seen examples of natural sponges being created with cotton, seaweed, beeswax, other sort of silk or wool that can actually be bundled and placed up into the vagina so that the sperm can't get through. Other forms of early IUDs, buttons or stones or gems that are placed into the uterus itself. So for your activity this week, I'm actually asking you to do a little bit of field work. I'd like you to go to a CVS, Walgreens, Target, Walmart, or several of them and compare. That would be great. I want you to find the birth control section of the store and answer the following questions that you see listed here. After you've done that, go ahead and type up your answers and submit them through the assignment submission page. I've included this slide here. It provides us with examples of all of the different family planning methods you can see on the right. On the left there, though, we have the prices associated with these different methods. And perhaps what should become clear to you is, patterns in the economic distribution of different family planning methods that probably tend to disadvantage women more than men. Also the fact that more of these have to do with modifying the female rather than the male body, that's also something to be considering. So the next topic then would be abortion, and this is a universal practice throughout human history that involves this struggle for control between the them, and your textbook talks a bit about this, society, religion, husband, or family as the them and the woman themselves. So this sort of struggle between who gets to control or decide what actually happens with a pregnancy in this particular example. One anthropologist, Devereaux, she looked at 400 different ethnographies of pre-industrial societies. In that study, they noted that each group knew about or practiced abortion in some form. Many of the techniques reported, they involved hard work, lifting heavy objects, climbing, jumping, starving, shaking of a woman, placing hot things in her abdomen to try and cause anything really to try and cause bleeding, which would abort the pregnancy. Other sort of herbal remedies and teas or potions, these are the sort of precursors to birth control and morning after pills. We have some, blurred lines of intention when it comes to abortion versus a miscarriage. Obviously, the only way to know is to talk to the mother themselves, but this also comes back to that uncomfortable topic that we don't really like to discuss or know how to discuss in our modern societies today. What we do know, though, is that the options for women anywhere are shaped by large-scale economic and political forces that are beyond their control. The ruling powers and ideologies within different societies are what determine the availability of contraception, family planning, and other educational or medical services related to reproduction. For us here in the United States, we gained the freedom to choose with the Roe v. Wade decision in 1973. This stated that a woman's decision to have an abortion is protected under the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment. But it must be balanced against the state's interests in regulating abortion based on the 3 trimesters of pregnancy. So what that means is during the first trimester, the government is not able to prohibit abortions at all. During the second trimester, the government could require some reasonable health regulations. But during the third trimester, abortions could be prohibited entirely as long as laws provide for exceptions in cases related to the mother's health. What we can see on this map are the abortion laws prior to the passage of Roe v. Wade. Gives you a sense of how many different states it was completely illegal to have an abortion within, and then varying regulations or stipulations that allowed for its legality in certain places. So were women getting abortions before Roe? Well, of course they were. And of course there were significantly more deaths before the passage of Roe, because women had to seek out any sort of unregulated practice that would have helped them to abort their pregnancy, to meet their desires. But with the passage of it, it allowed for it to be hospitalized, standardized sort of procedures, which has significantly lessened the amount of deaths associated with this practice. More recently, we've seen state laws that are starting to place restrictions on abortion. These things called trigger laws. So currently not enforceable, but if Roe v. Wade were to be overturned, then essentially abortion would become illegal in that state. We've also seen the closure of Planned Parenthood facilities in many parts of the country, which creates these long distances that women have to travel in order to exercise their freedom of choice. As this is an anthropology class, the political and legal aspects of this debate are important, but another one of these is the sort of social or cultural side of how we've come to define personhood more recently. In this particular case, fetuses have begun to have what's considered social personhood. We talked about this a little bit in our nature versus nurture discussion a few weeks ago. When a woman becomes pregnant, we know their sex, so we can begin naming them. We test or treat fetuses for different sorts of diseases, and we're already starting to make life-altering decisions about their identities before they're even born. In this case, our modern societies are considered moral pioneers. We're trying to explore this new ethical territory as best we can. This does apply to other types of high-profile controversies. Cloning, for one thing, orphaned embryos, the Human Genome Project itself, any sort of artificial life forms, or interspecies organisms. All of this is brand new ethical territory, and we kind of just have to continue figuring it out as we go. What's becoming more difficult in the case of abortion is that we're having a hard time separating reproductive acts from these large processes involving politics, global health, and law. There's also this increasing moral significance placed on the fetus that contributes to the debate about the control women ought to have over their own bodies. So in this case, when does a fetus become a social person is really what the essence of this debate comes down to. Human infanticide, it's actually widely practiced in many places throughout history, using a variety of methods. More commonly, we tended to see that baby girls tend to be thrown away more than boys. This comes back down to patriarchal societies that value the life of men over women. As anthropologists, though, what we need to do is take ourselves out or try and get an outsider's perspective on what we're viewing and look at infanticide as a way to alter the reproductive stream at a point before the child has the status of what's considered to be a real person within that culture. So you're probably very familiar with baptism in Christianity, circumcision in Jewish communities. Well, there's also the Hindu practice of the naming ritual that takes place several days after the baby has been born. These are what we call social birth events. It's a ceremony or ritual that marks the point in time when the child takes on or is given a cultural identity. And it is always different from the biological birth itself. So in this case, in societies that practice social birth and view it as that entrance into personhood rather than the insemination and pregnancy itself, the death of weak, illegitimate, excess, deformed, unwanted babies in those societies is not defined as murder before this event has taken place. Because before that event took place, that baby is not considered a full member of the society. So for this, some cultures do regard infanticide as an abortion that just occurs very late in the reproductive stream, and that there's nothing wrong with that practice. So it might be a hard thing to wrap our heads around in modern US society and with the severe debates that go around this topic, but just wanted to bring this up as a point of consideration for all of you because we're here to learn about the anthropological perspective